How did that transition take place?
So the transition, to be honest, was not planned at all. And it was that time in my life where I was not yet doing anything. And I was probably traditionally going to get back to architecture. One thing led to the next and we signed the LOI. There were a lot of eyebrows being raised onto why we got it, how will we manage it, who are these children. I remember somebody who's now a dear customer and a friend even saying, who will buy premium luxury cars in this country?
I think both of you have been in an industry where you kind of charted an uncharted path, right? I don't think so 20 years back women were in automotive industry.
And Renuka, you grew up around cars, but no one thought that you could make a career out of it.
My dad really didn't think there was a career for women at that point of time because he said, what will you do? You be a mechanic in my garage. You know, he said the MBA is the thing to do. Till I realized Indian customers are very hard to get paid from. The only thing I could afford was the hairdressing course with the money I'd collected. So by default, that became the choice. A lot of them told me, come on man, you've got to get in a car. You drive, why aren't you racing and stuff like that? So I officially
But
bought
you had
a car.
to pay him money.
Yeah.
You had to pay him money. I love that.
Pay him money. Yes. At the rate that they were selling the car, I had to pay him the official rate that they were selling those cars at. And I entered my first race in Juhu with the help of these boys. My dad had no clue that I'd entered the race till, like the whole qualification round happened and he was mad.
Welcome to the Circle podcast, brought to you by the Women's Leadership Circle. I'm Gayatri Rangachari Shah, your co-host, and I'm joined by Jaya Mehrotra, my lovely fellow co-host. Today, we're discussing the world of automobiles, an industry traditionally dominated by men. But joining us today are two guests who are incredible leaders and who happen to be women in this industry.
Hi everyone, I'm Jaya Mehrotra. At Circle, we aim to have inspiring and interesting conversation with subject matter experts and thought leaders. I'm thrilled to be co-hosting this show with my very dear friend Gayatri. When you think of selling luxury cars, reviewing speedy cars, and powerful machines, you think of that as a male business. But I guess that's not true. And today our guest will tell you exactly that.
We have with us today Pooja Choudary, Managing Director of Infinity Motors. Pooja has helped to redefine the luxury car dealership space in India. She represents brands like BMW, Mini, Lamborghini, Porsche, and a host of other luxury brands that are world famous. We're happy to be sitting in the Infinity Cars showroom in South Bombay, and you can see two swanky cars behind us.
Our next guest needs no introduction. She's Renuka Kirpalani. She has 20 years of experience in automotive journalist and content creation. She's been driving, reviewing, and test driving some of the best cars around the world, and she's been doing it for 20 years.
Renuka and Pooja, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, we thought we'd do something fun. So Pooja, Jaya, and Renuka, what was the first car you ever drove, and how old were you?
I think these days it's illegal to say how old we were when we first drove. I used to sit on my dad's lap and kind of park the car at a very, very young age. It was always a passion. The first car I drove was a Fiat. I did my first race in a Fiat. So yeah, that was the first car that I drove and I learned my driving actually on my grandmom's Chrysler. We used to go to her farm in Gujarat, and in the compound we were allowed to kind of drive when we were younger. So I was probably 12 or 13 when I started driving in the compound of my grandmom's farm. And it was this big, massive old Chrysler. That's how I learned driving.
Thank God there were no CCTVs those days.
Within the compound.
Pooja?
So I was 17 when I learned driving, very officially started learning with a learner's license. The first car I drove was the Maruti Gypsy. I remember it was a white colored Gypsy with a soft canvas top. And I used to feel like a queen bee driving that car. I almost could, in your mind you have this vision of a cowboy getting off on the ranch. I used to actually, because SUVs were not big that time. Now everyone has an SUV.
And the Gypsy was a hardcore one.
It was a hardcore one. It was manual, and you just felt like you ruled the road. So I still miss that car.
In fact, I lived in a city where gypsies were tested for army. There were a lot of gypsies taken for the army. So, of course, I grew up in the 1980s in Delhi. And of course, I remember, somehow I've forgotten Fiats, but I remember there were a lot of ambassadors around us. And my father took us to an auto fair, which I now remember, in Pragati Maidan. And Maruti Suzuki has just come into India. Imagine, yes, remember? And Dad booked one of those initial cars, and of course, it was a red color car. And of course, that's how I grew up in the 1980s. And of course, my father very possessively took me on a test drive. I think I was posted in New Jalpaiguri, and Dad said, "Okay, I'll teach you drive." But of course, he was very possessive of the car. I drove for a kilometer and he said, "You can't learn. Get out." That was the end of me trying to. Yes.
You know, there are very few parents, I think, who have the patience to teach their children driving. And I think those that do, congratulations, because it is an art. I also tried with my kids because, you know, everybody says, oh, you have to teach them driving. After a while, I told them, I said, go learn the basics from someone else. Then I'll come and refine, but I can't do this. I just can't.
It's very
I get,
nerve-wracking to be sitting next to your young child, you know, when they're driving. It's
I'm
better
a very
to
bad backseat driver per se, so.
So my first car, Pooja, you will love this. The first car I ever drove was a Mini. And I was 7 months pregnant with my son at the time, and actually I have to admit that I do not drive, and so I thought, okay, now I better know this very important life skill since I'm going to be a mother. And I'm very ashamed to admit that it was the only test I've ever failed in my life, because they failed me. This was in the US in Long Island, and they failed me because I was driving too slowly. So, but the Mini is very close to my heart, and I probably should get back, behind it and get a learner's permit and then go and, learn how to drive again.
This is a task for Pooja and me. We've got to get you behind the wheel.
But listen, some women are meant to be driven. What's the problem?
Oh, I like that. I really like that.
So, we have a next icebreaker, and I'm sure I'm going to put you on a spot, both of you. I know it's like choosing your favorite child. So what is your one favorite car that you would like to own?
So I say, why have one when you can have many? Yes. For many things in life. So considering the brands I've gotten close to and I represent, of course, the convertible as a concept is something I would love, only if we weren't living in hot, sultry Mumbai. The McLaren convertible is a really, really cool car to own.
Stole my answer.
I was just going to say, Pooja, give me a McLaren, I'll gladly have one, yeah.
Oh, so we're all McLaren convertible lovers here.
Absolutely, I think that's.
But it's hard to pick a favorite, especially when you drive different cars every day. It kind of changes through the, you drive something and then that becomes your favorite for the moment, and then you drive something else. And so I think over time, it kind of.
Which is your current favorite? That's a very diplomatic answer.
I drove a Lamborghini Huracan Technica. I think it was the setting that I drove it in. We drove it in Modena around the factory. It's a naturally aspirated, which for us motoring enthusiasts, the last of its kind was the sound, the drama. It was just, I think that's lived with me for a while.
And last of the V10s coming up, so it's really, yeah.
What about you?
Well, I said, Pooja, I mean, I do love a convertible. Not that it's easy to ever, I think, be in one in Mumbai, but the McLaren convertible is, I think, really amazing. It's an extremely sexy car. So.
But for old time's sake, now you should look at the Mini convertible.
Actually, the Mini convertible is, and probably much more suited to Bombay roads.
At least you can park it anywhere.
True, absolutely.
Yeah, so Mini is my kind of a retirement car. But for me, for the last 10 years, I've had Porsche Cayenne on my vision board, and a red color one for some reason. But recently, I went to Infinity showroom, the Lamborghini showroom, and there I saw a red color SUV. I don't like those, and I was like, my loyalties are changing. So the vision board is changing.
So that's the problem, right? The market has changed from sports and sedans to SUVs. So today it's very difficult to pick a favorite. You could have one in each because they're so different in their DNA.
So to your point, why have one when you can have many?
But when you talk about the Urus and the Urus Performante, the SUV has become so close to a sports car now that it's really hard to pick.
Yeah, it's all kind of merging together, right? Well, on that note, I think we can get started with our first segment. And I'd like to start with you, Pooja, and ask you, you went from training and being an architect to, working in the automotive industry. How did that transition take place? And what have you what have you sort of learned from it?
So the transition, to be honest, was not planned at all. I was in the midst of having a baby, so I had kind of abandoned my architectural career, and I was coming back to India with my husband, and we were. I was just being a full-time mom, and he was setting up his career here with Lehman Brothers. And one fine day, he comes and says that I think BMW doesn't have a dealer in India, and they're looking for partnerships. And it's a great brand, and we've seen it in Hong Kong, and blah blah blah. Would you like that we take up the dealership? And I had no understanding of what it means, right? If someone just comes and baits you on something, you just kind of go with the flow. And it was that time in my life where I was not yet doing anything. And I was probably traditionally going to get back to architecture. And I'm not much of a overthinker. Like if something comes at me, I would take the risk if it seems within my frame. I wouldn't ask 100 questions and say, what if? So I really didn't challenge him too much, and I just kind of smirked saying, how why will we get it, sort of a thing, because we were not from the automobile industry in Mumbai per se. And then one thing led to the next, and we signed the LOI, and we were these new kids on the block taking up an automobile dealership in the premium luxury space.
And what year was that?
This was in the year 2006. My son was 6 months old.
Very charged new kids, we must say. I'm speaking from the other side, the perspective of the automotive journalism side, where I remember meeting her at this first launch and, asking her about herself, and she's saying, oh, I was an architect and we just gave up everything from Hong Kong. We decided to come here, and I was looking at her with my jaw a little bit open. And I'm someone who's pivoted quite a lot, but it was such a big move and completely different industry, and they were doing such a brilliant, they've done such a brilliant job and continue to do so.
And so that's how you took the plunge.
So that's how we just took the plunge. We didn't overthink it, and we were actually very delighted that they gave us this opportunity. There were a lot of eyebrows being raised onto why we got it, how will we manage it, who are these children, where have they come from, what is their background? I mean, everyone asks you 100 questions. I remember somebody who's now a dear customer and a friend even saying, who will buy premium luxury cars in this country? So, there were all sorts of darts being thrown, but I really didn't take those to light at all. And we just went with the flow and built it brick by brick, literally.
And literally like less than 20 years ago.
18. It's exactly my son's age. So every milestone is, mapped with.
I remember those days. I remember, and how hard she worked. You both worked.
Yeah, that of course. You have to. I mean, it's not.
Building a business is not easy.
So, such a brilliant pivot from architecture to cars. And some of the cars you deal with are some of the top brands in the world, and they're like a benchmark in engineering. So I'm sure you had to unlearn and learn new things. And I'm sure you were underestimated while doing it. So how did you kind of start coping with it? What were some of the challenges that you faced early on? And I think both of you have been in an industry where you've kind of charted an uncharted path, right? I don't think so 20 years back, women were in automotive industry. So I would love to know from both of you, how was that in the beginning for both of you?
So you have to, I wouldn't say I learned and unlearned. There is a lot of common synergy in architecture and automobiles, so to say, because you're dealing with clients even in architecture and in brands. The difference in brands is you're dealing also with a brand who is sitting on your head and giving you all the guidelines. So it's actually like the mother-in-law, right, that you're dealing with. And
we're trying to break stereotypes here, Pooja.
I love the mother-in-law metaphor just now.
So you have to keep her happy, right? So you have to keep your brands happy. But for you, the daily work is to keep your customer happy. So, and it's the same as an architect, right? You design for your clients.
The customers, like your kids, they're constantly driving you crazy.
They're constant, and they're high demands. And the more you deliver, the more is expected. So, but there were these synergies where you are delivering for customers. You're also doing a need analysis of what their requirement is. It's also the same with cars. So there were some synergies. You do learn to be more patient, or you unlearn to be impatient, because in the car business, you need instant results. There's month-on-month targets. There's pressure on audits. There's a lot of compliance issues that you deal with, whereas in architecture, you're the designer. You do the stuff. It's a gestation of 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. The sites can go on. You really don't have someone except your customer or the woman of the house who's dealing with you in the construction, giving you timelines. So there is a lot of stringent stuff which you have to kind of quickly adapt to when you deal with brands, with their policies, with their compliances. But in architecture, you have you're your own boss, right? You don't really, you give time. And on the creative side of the world, there's a lot more arrogance. But when you represent brands and you're selling to customers, you have to be humble. So there is a very different take on that, which I felt was challenging initially. Like, you just have to suck it up and say, yes, we're in the service industry.
Yeah. And Renuka, you grew up around cars.
Yes, I did.
But no one thought that you could make a career out of it. So please tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up around cars. My dad used to build race cars, tune cars, had his own workshop, raced and rallied himself. So
This is in Mumbai?
In Mumbai. So I used to constantly, like after school, when mom was busy at work, I'd be taken from school and put in the workshop. And you know how it is, you've just got to keep that kid busy so she doesn't get in your way. I'd be given carburetors to open up and things. And so at a very young age, I was very familiar with car stuff. And the smells, the sounds around the racetrack, I kind of grew up with it. So obviously I wanted to do it. My dad really didn't think there was a career for women at that point of time, because he said, what will you do? You be a mechanic in my garage. So, he said the MBA is the thing to do. So I was made to study commerce, which I hated with a vengeance. Hated. I mean, it's not my subject, it's not my passion. I went through the motions. And while I was in college, I realized very quickly that I don't like this. It's not something I'm going to have a career in. And I'd done up my house at that point of time. My mom and me had done up our house. Her friend liked it and said, can you come and help us? And then somebody else liked that and said, can you come and help us do our Lonavala bungalow? And somehow interior design became a thing in my life. So I started doing interior design and I was enjoying it for a while, till I realized Indian customers are very hard to get paid from.
Oh gosh. Pooja, would you like to comment?
And I'm very bad at collection. I'm a full Parsi in that sense. Like, I don't know how to ask for money. So I decided that I was going to do something with all the money I'd collected. I decided I was going to do something where, people had to come pay me and go. So I had two choices of going and doing photography or hairdressing abroad, because I kind of wanted to get out of the country at that point of time. You want that liberation from your parents. The only thing I could afford was the hairdressing course with the money I'd collected. So by default, that became the choice, and I did that. I came back and worked at the Taj for very many years. So yeah, I'm a hairdresser by profession as well.
That's why your hair looks so wonderful.
Yeah, and when I came back, I'd grown up around these kids, the boys on the racetrack, because their parents used to race and rally, and a lot of them told me, come on man, you've got to get in a car, you drive, why aren't you racing and stuff like that. And my dad used to have a team, and every year they used to sell off the cars. So they convinced me, just buy the car off him and enter the race, because my dad really wasn't letting me do this. So that's what I did. I bought a car from my dad. I told him, I said, now I'm 20, 21. I need to drive, right? I need my own car. So I can't afford a new car. You're not buying me a car. So I'll buy one of your old race cars with the money I've collected. So I think he was kind of proud that I'd collected enough money to buy a car. And very willingly, he gave me that. So I officially bought a car.
But you had to pay him money.
Yeah, yeah.
You had to pay him money.
I
love
had to
that.
pay him money. Yes, yes. At the rate that they were selling the car, I had to pay him the official rate that they were selling those cars at. So I bought that car off him, and it was a properly developed race car. And I entered my first race in Juhu with the help of these boys. My dad had no clue that I'd entered the race till, like the whole qualification round happened, and he was mad. He was really, really mad at me. So,
But why? Because what did he think it was?
I think he just thought that it wasn't a career for women. It was not easy in those days. There weren't very many women. And, a lot of it is, there are no loos around. And we'll come to that in this conversation. But it's not an environment that's conducive to women. Everybody's a male around that whole domain. And I think even though he knew I had that passion, he just didn't know. I don't think he didn't want it. He just didn't know how it would fit. And he thought that I had better potential or better careers that would be
better career
for me.
prospects, right?
And I think there were no role models, right? He couldn't see any women who were ahead of you who could help you chart up.
And not just in India, but all over the world, right?
Over the world there still were women, but it's a very different environment there versus here, And even in his whole career of racing and rallying, there was probably just one or two women who had come in and raced, like Katie Barthena or someone like that. It was not very, and he probably saw how tough it was for them. So I think that's where he was coming from. So I bought that car. I entered the race, the boys, and I have to say, this is where when people talk to me about bias, I say I am so lucky that I have never faced it in my life. I had all the boys I'd grown up with egging me on, pushing me, helping me. One of them even went and borrowed tires from my dad's thing, saying they were for him because my dad refused to give them to me and put them on my car. They helped me right to the end. I qualified and I qualified first. And then that's when I got really nervous. Till then I was very chill because then there was something to prove, and then I knew my dad was watching and I said, now if I don't do anything, then it's going to be. So I entered the race. Next day I did the race. I got overtaken at the first corner, and behind me was the third guy, and we were all racing down to the first corner, and the guy behind me flipped. So I remember watching that and I was so scared, I just turned the rear view mirror. And I said, I can't watch this, otherwise I'm going to get completely psyched. Turned the rear view mirror and then I just drove like a bat out of hell. And suddenly I saw this yellow flag in front. I honestly have no recollection of the race. I saw this yellow flag in front of me, and when you get yellow flag means you have to stop. So I stopped and the marshal looks at me, says, what are you doing? And I was so nervous. I said, what have I done? Like, what have I done? Because I just had this tunnel vision. And he said, the race is over, ma'am, can you go in? And then I looked around and there was no one around me. I said, shit. So I go into the pits, and it's in Juhu at the airstrip. They used to have the race. And just as I came off, I had this very close friend of mine, Farah. She pulls me out of the car. She said, you know what you just did? And I'm like now really shaking. I said, what did I do? And I could hear from the crowd, as you took off the helmet, Ay la, ye to ladki hai. And that it must have been a couple of seconds, but in my life, it was like a lifetime that played out of what the hell have I gone and done?
This is like a movie.
Yeah. And I said, what have I done? What have I done? I'm like, Farah, what did I do? And she said, you idiot, you won. Why are you doing an extra lap? So I was completely like in that tunnel.
You had won and done an extra lap.
I had won, and I was just continuously, I was just going round and round that thing in my own little tunnel vision, my own little bubble. I had no clue of what I had done. If you ask me, how did I win? What did I do? How did I overtake the guy? I cannot remember it. I just cannot remember.
Is that how your racing career
That's how it's been every time I get into a car on a racetrack. It's just like...
But that's the focus, actually. I would call it focus.
Yeah,
like a
you just kind of get into your own zone, and then everything else disappears around you.
So it's very interesting because, Jaya and I speak a lot about this, pivoting. You pivoted from architecture to selling cars and running this business, Infinity Cars. And then you, of course, have had, multiple pivots. I know Jaya has had, me personally, I have pivoted from management consulting to banking to government policy to journalism, So, and I think that the data says, at least in the United States, that an average person has about 12 jobs in their lifetime. I don't know if the data is there for India yet. But anyway, all we know is that people in today's day and age will move multiple jobs. And Jaya, I know you've done a lot too. So.
Yes, yeah. So, it's so inspiring to see how many pivots all of you have done, from architect to running this business. And when I look at it, it kind of brings a satisfaction and confidence that I'm on my third pivot. I'm one of the most difficult ones. And of course, thanks to that, I have got Gayatri in my life and so many such founding members who've come in my life. But I started as a banker for 2 decades. And around 2008, I think, I started feeling a need to have a mentor. We were in the deep end of financial crisis. And by 2012, I was feeling really lonely and isolated. And that's when I chose to become a leadership coach. And by, I think, around 10 years, I spent coaching people from around the world. I think I coached 250 people. But around 2022, 23, that's when I met Renuka. I felt the ladder was broken. We still had only 5% women CEOs. And there's a Deloitte report which says in 2018, there were 3.7% women CEOs, and in 2023, only 5.1% women CEOs.
The needle has hardly moved.
Yeah, and in fact, there's a Harvard study which says that the D&I is stagnant, the pay gap is not moving, and that's how the movement of WLC started. And thanks to that movement, people like Gayatri came in as founding members, and we are kind of building WLC together to finally fix this ladder and build an equitable future. It's not easy, but yes.
Yeah, no, you're right. I genuinely feel that as women, it is not only about career pivots, but we're pivoting on a daily basis. Morning we get up, we are mothers sending children off to school. By 9 o'clock, we are working women. By 12 o'clock, one cook will call from home and say, "Sabko khane mein aaj kya bheju ma'am lunch ke liye?" So you're again back to the kitchen mentally, sitting at work. 4 o'clock, you're maybe coordinating a car pickup. Evening, maybe you're having a dinner, so you're playing host. So we're pivoting daily. So
Very well said.
Yeah,
Very well
we're
said.
pivoting every hour, right?
Yeah, in fact, when me and Gayatri had to coordinate to discuss the episode, I was doing puja, she was attending, I was doing my husband's office puja, and she was doing somewhere attending some family commitment. So yeah, you're right.
There's
we
no
have to
giving
be-
up. I
But
mean,
this
I think
is why I feel like when you're saying the needle has hardly moved, I think women at the helm can do it so effortlessly. I mean, like Pooja does. Now, we're just so used to juggling the ball that no matter what the issue or what the problem or what happens, somehow we will find a solution. Plan B is always in our mind.
it is an effort, though.
No,
wouldn't say
I would
effortlessly.
also agree. I would say, Renuka, actually, we don't have a choice because, if you don't coordinate the thousands of things you have to, something will, fall through the cracks.
And it's not expected, unfortunately. I'm not trying to stereotype genders, but it's not expected out of the man to do it. So
Certainly not.
if there's a party in the house, it just becomes your problem
Correct.
to deal with,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
To host well, to see that the flowers are in place, to see that the food is
At one of the
perfect.
first meetings that Jaya had, which I attended, there was this one gentleman on stage and about 5 women, and the whole discussion was about how to make work environment equitable for women. And I was getting progressively angrier and angrier through this whole
I remember.
discussion. And at the end of it, I just stood up and I said, why the hell is this whole discussion about making it equitable? The women are there, right? Why don't you have the guilt of leaving your kids at home? Why should it only be the woman who has the guilt? Why they're equally your kids? Why is it that you're sitting here and saying, oh, I must help alleviate this guilt? No, you start feeling a little bit more guilty and maybe it'll become equitable.
Exactly.
So, I think the perspective needs to change a little bit. And I think that's when we'll start seeing more women everywhere, because unfortunately that responsibility is always just clearly dumped on them.
And a little bit of burden to young women who are also wanting to be either entrepreneurs or career successful. My advice will be, don't look at yourself as woman or man. When the opportunity arises, step up and just take it step by step. Right. We should also not put ourselves in the shadow of so when coming back to your first question, when we started this business and it was essentially male dominated or whatever, I honestly never thought of that point of view when I started the business. I just built it brick by brick. Of course, my husband was right behind me, supporting it, because at that time he was a banker. There were people around me telling me that you're a woman in this business, how will you succeed? There were people who would not treat me seriously. There were people who would probably think I'm a sales representative or a market. Designation never mattered to me, to be honest, because I've built it from one employee to what we are today. But for people, it really mattered. So when they see a woman, they can't imagine you're the owner. Right. And for me, it didn't matter because it made my work easy. I've come here to either do a workshop work or a sales job or whatever, and it kind of got the job done. Later on, if someone realized it was his problem to deal with, right, not mine. But I never put myself in that shadow. So I think that really helped me not cocoon myself and say, oh, but this is not my job. So if it meant standing till 12 in the night at a workshop site with 15 technicians getting stuff done, I didn't feel out of place. People would have thought, what is this woman doing in the middle of, whatever. So I think my advice also to young girls, young women who are wanting to make this, you get out of that shadow first. Take your tasks as you would as a challenge with your career. People will judge you, leave it be. I mean, that problem we can't get over, right?
I think it's a very well said, and I think it's more about having the confidence in yourself than expecting it to come from outside.
Yeah, because society is not going to change.
Exactly. And I think as long as you're confident of what you're doing and you are comfortable in your own skin, then that automatically radiates, when you feel comfortable with whatever. And I think even for me, it's been male journalists everywhere, and now we see so many more women coming into the automobile journalism field, and I feel really, really happy to see that, because more and more women are finding comfort in the fact that, hey, even I can do this, and it's not so odd anymore, to see a woman as an automotive journalist. Whereas when I was there, they used to just, people would walk into the room and say, good afternoon, gentlemen and lady, because they suddenly realized there was one woman over there in the room, But it's becoming more and more natural now, and I think that's more and more people feeling comfortable in their own skin. And I think it takes maybe one or two to kind of be there and people to see that if she can do it, so can I.
And I think, in fact, now even in terms of, on the sales side, I think the data is showing that women are playing an equal part in purchasing decisions of cars, right?
We are in the middle of a big wealth transfer happening to women. Women are making more and more decisions about buying cars, buying luxury goods. As we speak, there's a study which says 40% of new cars are bought by women.
So in fact, not only deciding the car, but also the decision on whether they're buying an SUV or a sedan, what is the positioning of the car in the family, hierarchy of different cars they have. A lot of the decision is taken by the women.
Or are you allowed to buy that sports car that you want to buy, or you're not?
I was about to say that unless the man is having a midlife crisis and then just goes out and buys
Which
some
works
kind of
for
crazy,
us, by the way.
Works for you, but
Totally
maybe not
works.
for the...
How many times do you have women in the showroom saying,
So, it's interesting. We have women who sometimes come and say, it's my husband's 50th or 60th. He's having a midlife crisis. Just give him the smashiest car you have. So the reds and the whatever, right? And there are some women who'll say, my husband has a problem. He's having a midlife crisis. We need a family car. He thinks he wants to have a sports car. Where are two people going to go? So you have to manage. For me, it's a lot about people management,
actually,
because
yeah,
I can't offend the woman.
You're a psychiatrist. You have to kind of
Absolutely.
deal with that. So how do you
Absolutely.
manage that, Pooja?
So, my husband jokes that I'm the agony aunt of the city. Anyone dropping by or passing by Worli comes to kind of vent something in their life, and then we sell them a car.
So you're the keeper of Mumbai's
Gossip.
secrets.
So you
Gossip
have to
girl.
handle the women first. When we have a family who enters, and if the woman is obviously a stronger personality, and you can see that, I always tell the team, handle the woman first. Understand, and don't, just go all over the place. So sensitivity is extremely important in the luxury industry, right? You cannot offend a customer who comes in, and most often it is, when you can judge who's the stronger, dominating one, you have to play within the...
But this is probably one of the biggest reasons of Pooja's success, because there was a study that showed that a lot of women go in with their husbands into automotive showrooms and get completely ignored, because everything is directed at the man, because they feel the man will know more about the car. And that offends the women. And more people and dealers are now teaching their staff to kind of deal with the women on an equal basis, because it helps the sale.
Because she is the influencer at the end of the day, right? It doesn't matter who cuts the check or who controls the money, but if she goes home and says, I don't want this car, or if she nags him, that purchase is not going to happen. So it's a lot about treatment, experience, and their women are more sensitive to these things. They will look at how they were looked after. I mean, even I would, for that matter.
What you're saying is, because you're mirroring, right? You've been underestimated and you've been ignored, and you're taking care of women right now. And I think that happens to all of us, because sometime, I think one time or the other, all three of us, you or even I, have been underestimated. And I think you are now going out of the way to make sure women are taken care of when they walk into the showroom. So I would like to know each anecdote from your life on when you were underestimated and how that played a role in your life.
So let me take that question first. I remember in the early part of my career where, as a young analyst or whatever, you're doing all the work, doing all the data analysis, all that, and then writing the slides and doing the presentation. And then you go into the room and you're basically, even though you've done all the work and are deep dive into all the information, nobody's looking at you for the answers. They're looking at, the senior man in the room for whatever information that they want. And then, luckily, I worked in a great company in those days, and it was the senior guy who said, well, actually, Gayatri's done all the work, so she's going to present. And so, what I'm saying is not unique. I think this happens to many young women when they first start their career. And it takes a while for people to begin to take you seriously. And one more anecdote is, Guneet Monga, who's the Oscar-winning Bollywood producer, she, in order to be taken seriously, because people would think that, oh, she's just someone in the room who'll go fetch the tea or whatever, used to put powder in her hair and to make herself look older, so she would be taken seriously, to color her hair kind of white. So that's the kind of stuff women have to do.
By the way, I haven't done that. Just take me seriously.
Yes.
Okay?
In fact, I think I have 3 different glasses just to be taken seriously. I wear glasses so that I have an executive presence and people will take me seriously.
But can I tell you something? I have a different take on this, and I think maybe Pooja will agree with me because she's like that. I think you have to start taking yourself seriously. What happens to most women, and I say this on a regular basis because there is that myth about women can't drive, right? And so many women come with this preconceived notion that, oh, we're the lesser drivers. Before they've even gotten behind the wheel or even learned to drive, they're assuming that they can drive on a lesser scale, right? And I keep telling them, but that's not true. You're starting at the same level as any man. And let me tell you, once you get behind the wheel, studies will show women are safer drivers.
Absolutely.
Because they're just more organized, they're more focused, they're used to juggling 10 things at a time, so they're used to juggling 10 things around them on the road as well. So my point is that you need to bust these myths in your own head before you can bust them around the world. And I think when you bust those myths in your own head and you say that I'm on equal footing, now let's see how it goes. You've got to be there first. All this external, nobody's going to take you seriously till you take yourself seriously.
But sometimes it is systemic, right? Even though you take yourself seriously, with the way, you know how things are set up, society is set up, it's very hard to have that. You really have to fight from your corner in a way to prove yourself.
But you fight much stronger when you believe in yourself. You see what happens. I agree with you. It is systemic. And the systemic overtakes you when you don't have your self-belief. But when you have your self-belief, you fight, right? So you need that fight, you need that self-belief, because if you believe in your ability and you believe in what you're doing, then you will fight no matter what ground. And I'll give you an example. Very, very early in my career, it was probably maybe my 5th, 6th shoot, I'd done a comparison between a Scorpio and a Tata Safari. And you know how the Corpcoms can get, and this was CNBC, it was television, and the Scorpio won the comparison, and Tata shot off a letter because they were a big advertiser on the channel. So they shot off a letter to my editor saying, we didn't expect this kind of blah, 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 and if you respect our advertising, whatnot, not. So at that time, I was purely the anchor. I was not running the whole show. So the editor, Govind Etiraj, at that point wrote off to Sumantra. Sumantra just passed me the mail and he said, I had nothing to do with this. And I got really offended. I told Govind, I said, see, you've employed me for a reason, for my opinion. I said, first and foremost, directing the question at Sumantra was pointless because it's not his opinion. You should have asked me in the first place before expecting a response, because had Sumantra responded, he wouldn't have known the correct answer. I said, I'm standing my ground, and if Tata has anything to say about this, I'm willing to argue with them, and if they can argue my points, then I'm willing to change my opinion. And me being me, the way I am, without realizing that I was not answering Govind Etiraj, but answering the Tata guy also on that mail, hit reply all.
Oh, you sent it to the Tatas.
Yes, Devashish Ray will tell you this story. And he said, many years later, he told this story in a forum about journalism. And he said, you know something? I had the utmost respect for the woman that day because she was a newcomer journalist, but she refused to back down.
She stood her ground.
He said, of course, I pretended to be really angry and I took her on and we had our little tiff. He said, but she refused to back down. She refused to say, and she said, if any one of my points can be proven wrong, I am willing to take my thing. And he said, I could not prove those points wrong. So I think sometimes when you have that belief and you fight, you're able to fight for yourself.
So, I have a little different point on this. What happened to me about a few years back when I was a leadership coach, I was working in a silo. When I would go to ask for some business or work, I found most men underestimating me. Most men really underestimating who I was. In the beginning, because I was much younger that time, it was a fuel. It made me angry. And that's how WLC happened. From a place of I'm being underestimated. And there's a little bit of activism. No? When you do something like WLC, it comes from an activistic energy. It doesn't come from keeping the world as safe. You're change making, right? We are change makers here, right? And of course, that energy helped in the beginning, but now I'm changing. I'm saying that I can't stay angry about things. I have to change. And I think finding women allies and finding women who support you. And I think people like Gayatri and so many founders have supported me. And there were strangers in my life, not the friends. It was not the friends who helped me. It was actually complete strangers who joined and gave the confidence.
So, my view on this is it fuels me. When someone underestimates me, it actually motivates me crazily. And it doesn't motivate me with a negative energy. It just motivates me to prove to myself that I can do it, not to necessarily that person, because he's maybe nobody in my life. He passed a comment and he went off. I remember early on when I started this business, you meet many car dealers in the industry and you meet them in forums, and people were surprised. They were trying to check me out. Who's this, girl who's going to run this business? And BMW as a brand is extremely, high up there. It wasn't just a normal mass market brand. And I remember one dealer passing this loose comment saying, "Ye ladki kya chalayegi gaadiyon ka business." Now that stuck with me, And maybe he was right if I was not so detail oriented. So what I did that day was, I didn't let that comment bother me as a woman or a man or a business. I just went and said, yes, I know nothing about this business. I actually didn't know the bonnet from the bumper of a car. I have never grown up in luxury cars, to be fair. And I said, yes, if I really need to succeed, what do I need to do? So I actually learned the business. I spent all my time and energy on learning what is the brand expectation, because the brand has so many verticals that you have to work with, right? There's after sales, insurance, customer satisfaction, whatever. There's a whole plethora of things. And then there is the whole customer angle, and there's so many things to building and succeeding. So I actually went academic and I learned the business and I built it then vertical by vertical. We had our challenges, we had our downfalls, but that stuck with me, that if you really want to succeed in anything, and of course people will always underestimate you, know your stuff, know your business, don't just faff.
And that gives you the confidence, right?
That is your confidence. So when you talk in a forum of maybe say 10 men in the same thing, if you're talking sense, at some point someone's buying it.
Exactly.
Correct.
Well said.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very well said. Absolutely. And on that note, I think I would love to turn to Renuka and ask her again something fun. You have driven some of the most expensive, not to mention the fastest cars in the world, something most of us will probably never experience in our lifetimes. Describe that thrill.
I think, people look at it now because of Instagram and social media. People look at it like, oh, wow, But for me, it was just the passion, something I love to do. And whether it's an Alto or whether it's a Bugatti, that thrill is somehow still the same, of something new that I'm driving, something new that I'm discovering, and the passion with it, So for me, it's never been, oh, because it's this car, I'm excited. I'm equally excited about a new car that's maybe very, very basic. I remember when one of the other journalists joined me on, he's now with somewhere else, but he had joined me on my team. He was a young spring chicken for literally his first job, and there was the Alto K10 drive and there was a Bugatti Veyron drive abroad. And we looked at him and we said, okay, you're going for Bugatti and I'm going for Alto. And he just looked at us and he said, are you serious?
You're trusting me?
Like, normally he expected that we'd pull rank and say, you're doing Alto. I said, and Hormuz, you know how Hormuz is, the editor, he was like, but that's the car that's going to sell in India the most and the more important one. So she's going there and you're going there, like one Bugatti will sell in India. So, for us, it's a completely different perspective. There's an excitement about different levels of things. Yeah, of course, the adrenaline and the pure thrill of driving something crazy and fast is always there. And that love and that passion gets fueled a little bit more when you drive something crazy. But I think it's spread over everything.
What's the fastest speed you've done in the fastest car?
Well, the speed record I broke was 357.1 in the Pininfarina Battista. We kind of were aiming to set a record, and we couldn't claim it's the fastest record for a woman in a production series car, because there isn't any data on it actually in the world. Strangely enough, there's lots of data for men, but there's no data for women. But we could claim it for India and Asia, so we did claim it for India and Asia. But yeah, we think it's the fastest that's been in a production car.
What does that feel like to go at 300 plus?
Alert, for sure.
Strangely...
How old were you when you were doing this?
56. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what was this car? I would love to know about the car actually.
So, this is a Pininfarina Battista. It's basically a company that Mahindra & Mahindra have bought. It was originally a design company which now builds their own cars. This is an electric car. So, yeah, getting up to speeds in that car is really quick because it's electric. In EVs, there's instant torque, so there's no waiting on the power to come. It comes bang, smack immediately. So when people ask me like, how was it? Like, you know, we were saving battery. It was the end of the day because a lot of records were being done. And I literally had 2 laps that I could go and set this record in. So the Italians, obviously, with their one-piece car, wanted to know that we wouldn't take it into the wall.
Wouldn't damage
so
it.
the first lap was like, I'm coming with you to just see how you're doing it. And we were doing it at Nat tracks. So we got out, and there's a straight, and then there's the high-speed oval. So we got out, and he said, go for it. So I said, okay, going for it. And 290, we were coming off the, you know, the thing, and we hit 300, and he said, okay, I think you can do it. Let's go back and you do your own round, you know. So I literally, in 2 rounds, I did it. There was just like, it was just so effortless. The car made it so effortless that it was just this completely easy. Yeah.
And does your heart beat fast? Like, how does that, you know, what does it feel like?
I think the nervousness is always there when you're starting a race or you're doing something different. I think for me, it was kind of doing this at this age after a very long time. I mean, I pulled out my, you know what, I pulled out my racing shoes after so long that the soles had come apart from the, you know, COVID and everything. We just chawed everything and the soles had come apart, and I literally had to stick them together with blue tack when I did this because I just hadn't used it for so long. So I think just that feeling of getting back into a car and doing this after ages, you kind of wonder, do I still have it? And it's more about proving it to yourself, right, than anything else.
So you were 56, driving a $2.5 million car at the speed of 357 kilometers. Gayatri, how are you feeling about not driving right now?
FOMO, total FOMO.
I think, Renuka, we're ready for driving lessons in only high-speed cars. Yes.
I'll get
Pooja's
you those.
getting the car.
Let me get my learner's permit first. But actually, Renuka, you touched upon a very interesting point, and it's a good pivot to our next segment, which is around innovation and what all is happening in the industry, you know, with EVs and all that. So, Pooja, let me turn to you and ask you, EVs, I mean, are they really the future, or is it a lot of hype?
So EVs are a part of the future. They are not your end game. Neither are petrol or diesel cars. I think the technologies have to go hand in hand. Biofuels are also being discussed globally. Consciousness to emissions, greener solutions is 100% the need of the hour. Is EV the only solution for the future? No. I think most brands have pulled back and said we are not only going to go into electric because there are so many markets globally which don't have infrastructure for charging stations. They're not going to break a whole city down to put cables for infra. They don't have energy and solar to supply to those charging stations or electricity for that matter. So there will be enough pockets in the world which structurally or infrastructurally cannot cater to EV.
I think Europe as well, you know, even developed nations have pulled back their thing because it's not only, I think, infrastructure. They've realized that resource, I mean, the lithium resources.
Yeah, and cobalt and, you know,
how are we going to scrap all these batteries? So there are lots of questions around.
But it is definitely a part of the future. It will form an X% of the market, whether it will be 30%, 20%, 35%, no one can say it today.
How is it
But
happening?
they're beautiful cars. And I find that the younger generation, the Gen Zs and the younger kids who come in are very, whether they say it out of genuinely being conscious or the schools today are instilling, like how in Holi they say we won't waste water and in Diwali they say we won't burst crackers, and my husband's like, what? Nobody wants to celebrate a festival anymore. But the younger generation has been inculcated to be so conscious that they talk about it all the time.
How are sales though for EVs? What are you seeing?
So, I'll be honest, the success of EVs is now brand specific. So some brands are really doing well in their EVs and some brands haven't got it right. It is not because it's an EV or whatever. I think some brands have evolved even in EV just like they have evolved a petrol or a diesel model in their cars. So some of their EVs are doing really well. Like in the mass market, I wouldn't comment on my brands because they are, touch wood, all doing well.
But BMW is doing really well.
Brilliantly well on the EVs.
Tell me, is
All our
EV
EVs
really?
are selling.
But is EV really a sustainable solution? If you had to put hand on your heart, is it a true sustainable solution with the battery?
So
end to end, I would say no.
Yeah, because they are still developing on how to
especially in our country where we're largely a coal-driven energy resource, so.
But at the same time, when you see what's happening in Delhi and the pollution, and if you actually visit Delhi in those months, your eyes burn when you exit the airport. it may not be the cars and the emissions, because today petrol and diesel cars are well certified under the emission norms. They are really not causing the pollution. But then
there
the
have been
government says
tests that actually this whole thing around petrol and diesel cars, it's a myth that needs to be
complete
busted,
myth.
because you have all these activists saying, oh, they're causing pollution. But if you test the air in Delhi, someone did the test and tested the air immediately out of the exhaust of the car. It was actually cleaner than the air outside. So the modern day cars emissions are not so bad.
not
They are
causing the
not the
problem,
major
principally,
cause of pollution. So we need to examine where the other causes are. Sorry, I'm a car person, but I had to say this.
You had to take up. You
I
had to
have
take up for the
it up
cars.
for my industry.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's
Yeah,
like the
it's
bad
highly
child
overrated.
of pollution, but it isn't really the bad child of pollution.
But Pooja, sorry, I was going to say that, you talked about the younger generation coming in and asking about EVs and all that. But are you also seeing a shift? I mean, because we also read that, millennials and Gen Z and all don't want to own cars, or for that matter, homes or anything like that. Are you seeing that, or is that just, again, a lot of hype?
So they want to own assets and they want to own cars, I can tell you that. They also want to own homes. Maybe they don't want to own jewelry, the younger girls. They just want, to have holidays and whatever. But also what I see, unfortunately, in the showroom is all entitled children, right? Or entitled Gen Zs who are already walking and thinking his dad is buying a premium car. So maybe they're not the right benchmark to say for those people who are still making it as first generation. But 100% every Gen Z wants to have his own car, because that's his, for that matter, everybody wants to own a car, because that's your mobility, that's your independence, that's your feeling of desire and achievement.
I think COVID fueled that even more, because people realized that you needed your own mode of transport. Shared and public transport in a situation like that was very, very difficult.
In fact, Gayatri, you yourself are saying in the luxury segment, I think experiences is becoming a big part of what you do. In fact, I was reading a data point that BMW X1 cars, 40% of cars are being bought by the age group of 20 to 40. Yeah. And in fact, I think we are shifting towards experience economy, right? Isn't that
See,
what that?
luxury, if you ask me, is not a product. It's an experience, right? Because today, if you have money in your wallet, there are 10 products in the similar segment which you can go and buy, right? Be it in cars, be it in houses, be it in with the builders, be it in handbags, be it in shoes. You can choose. You have variety of choice. So what is it that's going to make you purchase something over something is your experience, right, and your longevity with that brand and your association with that brand. So if a brand is faceless, let's say example, a bags brand is normally a faceless brand, right? If you have a problem with the leather after 1 year, there's no one going to, there's
no one you can really turn to.
There's a hierarchy. They may help you, they may not. But when you're dealing with, let's say in our industry with cars, I think the game changer, and that too for us, has been the sensitivity of the experience, the relationship that you build beyond the brand with the person, the connect. And that's what then brings these things in.
So it's not just about selling the car, it's about the after sales. It's about continuing the relationship.
But so many people have spoken about this digitization and retail sales online and everything, and will showrooms go away, and will everything become online even for cars? And we've always turned around and said no, because when you have a problem, do you like talking to a call center? No. You'd rather have that person there face to face, and you'd rather solve it because you know that there's someone responsible, right?
Luxury car sales, I believe, were about 6% last year in terms of the growth. And, after a big bull run, after COVID and all that. So how do you manage the cyclical nature of the business? Because obviously that must be...
Oh, yeah.
that
is quite a discussion point at all times in our business, also with our brands. So the business can tend to be cyclical. And if you plan your business basis this, it's not very... Unfortunately, I have to use the word sustainable. But so what we do differently is that we, even through COVID and even through now these last few years, we strategize and plan in a very systematic and a very stable way, right? So whether the market is 6% up or 12% up or 20% down, we try and keep stability in all our processes, in our approach, in our strategies, in our outreach to customers, in our compensation packages. there is always a stable approach. So to be honest, we don't face that kind of cyclicality as a group because our approach is different. So when COVID happened, markets were really tough. We didn't shut a single showroom. We didn't fire a single employee. We didn't downsize. We waited. This can only be built with a strategy. And you can't look at instant gains and quick remedies on things either. You know, sometimes people instantly want to, like after COVID, they did a lot of redoing of their policies and people were given half pays and whatever. There was so much of jigging that people did to come back to some sort of profitability. We did not take any knee-jerk reaction on the industry, and that stable approach actually helps us not be so affected. So we grew 14% last year actually, which is a very different trajectory from what the market showed. So it is important to have a stable approach to a business, a long-term vision, and no knee-jerk reactions. But the car industry can be like that.
And Renuka, you travel and you review cars all over the world, and you've been doing it for 20 years. Do you change approaches based on the economic headwinds changing, new generations coming? Have you changed the way you review cars or approach the whole process?
And especially with the younger fan following.
I think media itself has changed so much. I mean, when I started off, print was the big thing. Television was it. Do you see the younger generation watching television or open a newspaper? I don't think they do. Everything is digital now. So I've had to learn a lot in the process. And I think that is also key in any business, that hunger to learn, the willing to learn, the willingness to learn, willingness to adapt to new times, changes. I think those that haven't adapted get left behind. So I remember I started off with television, then I had to suddenly pivot to YouTube. YouTube was the big thing. And then, I remember, having this big fight with Hormuz, who was the editor. I said, we've got to have our own team. We've got to have our own YouTube channel. This is going to be the next big thing, because I was watching my children do it, if he wanted to wear a lungi to school, he'd say, Mom, switch on YouTube. That's how you wear a lungi. I'll show you how. And I suddenly saw this thing and I said, shit, man, everything is here, And I think YouTube was there, and then suddenly there was social media where everything is so much more immediate. I mean, like if you made a television program, you shot it, then you went back and you edited it, and then a week later it went out. Then YouTube came when it was like, okay, everybody's putting it out, let's put it. Now there's social media, you're sitting at the press conference and you've edited it and you have to put it out right there and there. So you have to learn so many things, adapt. Everything's becoming quicker and quicker.
So how do you upskill like that? How did you do it?
I think you just have to be willing to learn. Everything's out there on YouTube, let me tell you. You can upskill yourself any which way.
Really? So
you
don't
even
editing?
have to go to a class and learn. I think you just have to open your mind.
Alert.
It's just about being willing to change the way you work. I used to do programs that were 20 minutes long. Then it became like 10 minutes for YouTube. Now I'm making 1.5-minute reels. It's learning how to make that much information so concise. But it's a process, and it's been hard for me. It's not easy, to summarize. It's like, in school when they used to make you do précis and you had to summarize everything, was so hard. It is. So you have to change the way you think completely, and it's another pivot.
Because attention spans have also collapsed, right? With 100 reels that you may want to view on so many topics.
And hook. Now this is the big thing, hook. Pehle 30 seconds mein you have to get the hook, otherwise nobody's going to watch your content.
Now you please teach us. Okay?
Absolutely. Actually there's an interesting data point of learning. 1 billion people are watching podcast. In fact, from digital TV, podcast has become the big. So 1 billion people are tuning in to watch podcasts. So we are hoping to do. Yes, exactly. So I hope this podcast is one step in the right direction. And the world is changing, and education through podcasts is becoming the next big thing.
Right. Yeah, so Renuka, maybe you can come and give us a few tips.
The changing world.
Yes, yeah. Because I love what you just said, from 1 hour to 10 minutes to 5 minutes to 30 seconds. And that's the world we live in. Yeah.
But I think I also want to play devil's advocate as a long-time print journalist who's also written a lot of long form. I think that, of course, that world exists of the 30 seconds and all that, but I think there's also a market for the deeper dive, for people who want to read the 5,000-word article or listen to an hour-long podcast.
Can I share a secret? I don't watch video. I hate reviewing my own videos. I like reading. And if I ever have to research something, I do not watch a video, I read, because I find it so much easier to skip to the section I want and pick up whatever information I want. Whereas in a video, I have to scrub, find it, you never know where it is. Your eye just falls on information when it's in written format.
Yeah. So I think we can ask that one question. Yes. Which is one book, your favorite book right now?
Oh, wow. I honestly don't get any time to read a book.
Anything that you've recently read that opened your mind about, because you said you read.
I mean, it can also be a romance novel.
Yes. I'm on my 7th romance novel right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I
for
could
the
still
last
go
two-
back to Mills and Boons. Trust
Yes.
me.
Yeah, we do
dream
need.
world.
Yes. Yes.
I'm reading an interesting book at the moment called Footprints of the Gods. It's about, this guy has the theory that the earth is like an orange, and every so many years, because of our centrifugal force, the crust rotates. That's why the dinosaurs died, and how evolution has kind of happened. And he's gone and dug into old maps and ancient history, and I could not believe, like, oceans were mapped that long ago and things had happened that long ago. And his questions are also, how did they do it without the instrumentation? So it's pretty interesting to see that sometimes we don't realize, how developed our older civilizations were.
Human history is a continuum, and we forget that. We think, everything has happened only in our lifetimes, but there's so much.
In fact, this is an interesting point. Most generations don't learn from the previous generation. They want to do, and there's so much to learn from human history, actually.
There was a very famous Russian philosopher, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he said, those who do not remember history are condemned to repeat it. Sadly, human beings are like that. I've just finished Leonard Lauder's book. He was the head of Estee Lauder and really helped to grow the company into the beauty behemoth that it is now, global kind of beauty giant. And he wrote this amazing memoir because he's also a fabulous art collector. So he started out in life collecting postcards. And now, of course, then he's bequeathed his amazing collection to various important museums and all that. So this is an amazing memoir about both his professional career as well as, his passion, which was art.
I'm reading a book called The Airbnb Story. Yeah, because in every business you realize there are two aspects to building a business: your consumers and the people who are hosting your consumers. So that part is very curious to me, because as we build WLC together, we have the aspect of our members, but there's also experiences we want to create for our members for learning. And I realize there's another shadow community that you need to build, which is of people like you who come and teach our members. Yeah. So Airbnb Story is a great read. You must read the book. It's quite well written.
I will. Thank you. We'll put it on our next newsletter.
So Pooja, you've built an impressive portfolio of brands, and I'm sure over a period of less than 20 years. And this must have taken a lot of hard work and a certain framework. How did you build these collaborations? And I think three of you, I see that you're doing so much collaborative work across industries, across international brands. So what goes into building this kind of collaboration or this kind of trust in your business?
So, it takes a movie star, that one good movie, to start and get established, and then he has to be consistent. So for us, it was that one opportunity. Somebody somewhere laid faith in us as novices in the industry, and that was BMW, who laid their faith for us to grow the brand in a very important market like South Mumbai. So we had to get that story right. So we put in day, night, all effort, all acumen. My husband is a banker, so a lot of business mindset on how to form a company, right? It's not only about acquiring the brand and then sitting arrogant that I have a brand. You have to really build their trust. So once you build their trust, you deliver what you commit. You stand by what they want to have from you, what you deliver. What does a brand want? They want to deliver themselves to the customer, and they want you to deliver the customer to them. You are their state. So once you build that trust and establish your credibility, then the next movie and the next movie comes a little easier. So to be honest, the first brand was the challenge. We had to prove ourselves, and then the other brands didn't come easy. But at least you got an appointment when you asked for one. At least when you pitched for business, they knew you had a success story already. And then, of course, your reputation builds on its strength, and it's a one step at a time approach. The brands that we now have, the bouquet of cars that we now cater to, is built over 18 years. And we've also taken a very conscious call not to be everything for everyone. So we didn't venture into, let's say, mass automobiles. We are, sticking to niche because now we've developed that as a forte. So we want to be that thing for some people, but we decided not to do everything so that we can keep our specialization in focus. And today, it's not easy still. You still can't take any brand for granted. You have to work hard. You have to keep reinstating the faith, and every day is work. You can't sit back and think that it's now taken and I'm queen bee. No, it's everyday work with the brands.
I think she just made 3 very important statements. It's identity. She's very clear about who her identity is. These are the brands I'm focusing on. She said, you know, it's hard work, which it is going to be. And I think it's also about being very sure of where you want to go, right? So I think these are the things, credibility. That was the other one that I was thinking of, credibility. I think when you have your identity, you are credible and you're sure of your direction, I think then everything else falls into place. The collaborations come, the people happen around you, and there's trust, right? When you're credible, there's trust. When you're hardworking, they recognize it. And when you're very sure of who you are, then people know what you're there for. So I think those are the things that help you build these relationships and sustain them over a period of time. And I think in any industry, leave ours alone, most of the things work on relationships that you build over a period of time, right? I think, especially in India, you know, we always use that word sifarish, right? And that all happens on relationships, right?
But sifarish doesn't come, it's not about, you know, you have
It's
to
not
build.
about, but yeah,
Sifarish is
yourself.
recommendation,
Sifarish
but
is just a recommendation. Then you
Yeah.
have to prove yourself, right? But that recommendation comes through a relationship. And I think a lot of things in India happen. She will get customers through word of mouth on a relationship she's built with her first customer. Then that customer will go out to the rest of the world and say, hey, I had a great relationship with Pooja. I think you can go to her. And it works like that. And I think it's any industry. People who work with us will say, hey, I worked with Renuka. She was professional. So, so I think that.
I think the customers become your brand ambassador.
And I think to Pooja's point, what she said right in the beginning is that first movie is the important thing. I mean, in my case, now brands, global brands, big brands come to me, big luxury brands come to me to want to, let's say they're opening in India and they want a partner because they need to draw in a certain crowd or something. And this is not what I do really for a living, but somehow, sometimes I get pulled into these. And when I really believe in the brand, I'm happy to help. Or whether it's an international publication wanting to, sort of have me write for them or work with them or whatever. But a lot of it is about authenticity and credibility. So in addition to the relationships, when they know, and I always talk to Jaya about, sort of quality, when they know that you can deliver a certain quality and provide a level of service that they may not, maybe they're worried about that. I think if they feel that they have that faith in you, I think then it happens.
That comes with that credibility, right? The credibility, like you said it's all that about credibility. And I think authenticity is what she said, knowing who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. It kind of all
and whatever
ties in
you
together.
do it with passion.
Correct.
Chances
That's 100%
of success
right.
are 100% if you do it with your passion.
And in fact, whenever I see you both talking about your businesses, I see your lights, your eyes literally sparkling with that passion. And that's why you can keep doing it for 2 decades. So just to summarize what both of you said, and I liked what you said about Sifarish. Actually, Sifarish is an outcome. It's an influence to all your 3 points: credibility, consistency, and trust. You cannot build anything overnight. Yeah, and these are very important. Credibility, consistency has to be built over a period of time.
And as Renuka said, hard work. It's not easy.
It's not easy. And it's step by step. There's no shortcut.
And it's a roller coaster. Don't think that trajectory is like the graph that you see in all these PPTs. Yeah, PPTs. It's not. It's going to be up. It's going to be down. It's going to be up. It's going to be down. And there's a song by Ronan Keating, and I absolutely love the song because the words in the song is life is a roller coaster and you've just got to ride it. And I think that summarizes it for me so
Yeah, and
beautifully.
something she said in the very beginning, and I know Gayatri keeps drilling it down my head like a cute friend she is, compliance. And we are bankers, right? Governance and compliance.
Oh, man.
So, that is a big thing. So I would say consistency, compliance is very important, and credibility. I would say the 3 C's are coming to me. Yeah.
So to that, to conclude now, I, want to ask all of you, what are 3 habits or behaviors that you really feel have helped you get to this point in your lives? Renuka, let's start with you.
Ambition, organization, focus.
I think for me it would be transparency in approach, being approachable to my peer group and my employees, and delivering what I commit.
I think for me, a lot of patience. I'm very persistent, and I'm constantly happy to learn. That has allowed all the pivots. So those are a big, yeah.
Open-mindedness, flexibility, and listening.
All the virtues we all need.
Well, thank you, Renuka, Pooja, and of course, Jaya. Always a pleasure with you for taking the time to speak to us about actually an amazing industry that, frankly, me as a non-driver did not know that much about, and really to be role models for a whole generation of women who now know that they can break into what is perceived to be a male bastion. So thank you so much. We've learned a lot. And Jaya, I think that this has been such a fun episode. What do you think?
No, absolutely. And as me and Gayatri always feel that we don't drive, but I can see how excited we are at the thought of sitting in a business like this, talking about cars and actually women shaping the industry. And that gives me so much confidence in the future, an equitable future for women.
You guys may not drive, but you women are driven.
Absolutely.
And you drive something from morning to night.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I always say that.
Yes. And we are decision makers. We are the decision makers, and we create tables like these.
And actually, I want to say, the automotive industry always seems kind of like hard and, sort of mechanical and all that. But actually, having the both of you here shows such a human and emotional side to this sector. So thank you for that.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.